We welcome back to the show U.S. Treasury Secretary, Mr. Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it very much. How'd I do?
Oh, Larry, Larry, when I used to be a professor, I was known as a tough grader. That was a solid A. Solid A. Solid A. No grade inflation.
Well, I mean, it's speaking the truth, and you're going to have a chance to do it over in Davos. Okay, we have sound from today. The big news is comments by Mr. Trump about the Fed. Can we roll the tape on this? Here it comes. Hang on.
I see Kevin's in the audience, and I just want to thank you. You were fantastic on television today. I actually want to keep you where you are, if you want to know the truth. Kevin Hassett is so good. I'm saying, wait a minute. If I move them, these Fed guys, certainly the one we have now, they don't talk much. I would lose you. It's a serious concern to me. So I just want to say thank you very much. You've done incredible. We don't want to lose him, Susie. But we'll see how it all works out.
All right. That was Mr. Trump today on Kevin Hassett. Mr. Secretary, how'd you read that?
Well, Larry, we've run a very robust process, 11 candidates down to 5, down to 4. And one thing I do want to say about the move from 5 to 4, the one who did make it from 5 to 4 was Fed Vice Chair Mickey Bowman. She's fantastic, Vice Chair for Regulation. President Trump and I both agreed that she was doing a fantastic job where she is. We thought her highest and best use was to stay there. We're determined that President Trump will select a Fed chair to work well with her on more financial deregulation. In terms of today's remarks, we had the final interview of the candidates. Rick Reeder was in the Oval yesterday with the president. And look, Kevin Hassett has been a great colleague, continues to be a great colleague. Your old job, NEC director, one of the most powerful financial jobs in the government. So I understand President Trump has him in the Oval, in the building every day. And if that's the president's prerogative, then so be it.
I guess earlier in the week, I can't remember. There's so many comments about it. But we might have it I might have it on the full screen. Yeah, here it is, a Reuters story. Trump says he has no plans to fire Fed's Powell despite the investigation. Get to that in a second, the Powell wars. He also said he'd ruled out U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent for the role because he wants to stay where he is. And then he said the two Kevins are very good. So the inference here, before I get to the subpoenas and all this Jay Powell stuff, the inference is that Kevin Warsh is now the front runner for the spot.
Yeah, only the president knows, Larry. As you know,
yes.
It's his prerogative. He has been thinking about this almost since day one of Trump 2.0. He's been frequently expressed his disappointment with Chair Powell. And so we've run a process, and it will be the president's decision in the next couple of days or weeks. I'd expected that we would have a decision either before he leaves for Davos or when he returns.
I'm sure a lot of people were surprised at the subpoena for Jay Powell and the goings-on last weekend. I guess the subpoena came out Friday night, and the Fed was ready with their little video. Many of us, including myself, believe that Jay Powell has done more to damage Fed independence than any chair in recent memory. That's my personal view anyway, and has done very badly in Fed policy. You've written critically about it in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere. But the issue now, the president said he's not calling for Jay Powell's firing. He kind of did a little plausible deniability last weekend in an interview late Sunday night, saying he didn't know about the subpoena and the investigations of the Fed cost overruns. There is no, as far as I know, perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Secretary, there is no grand jury impaneled. There are no charges being brought. I'm not sure what there is here, except a little side war going on. Maybe you can enlighten us, because you're coming to the point, January 31st, big date, I think, Steve Myron's position comes due. And he's going to go back to the CEA, but there's an open seat. That would be the moment to appoint the Trump chair.
Well, Larry, a lot to unpack there. First of all, I'm not going to comment and can't comment on the ongoing investigation, if there is one. I don't know much about it. What I can tell you is that as far back as beginning of last summer, I've been calling for the Fed to conduct its own internal investigation into a lot of the deficiencies that the institution has had. Because Larry, as you know, I know, and everyone, especially in the financial markets, knows, the Federal Reserve occupies a special place with the American people. It has a tremendous amount of sway and influence over their life, but there is no accountability. So I think the Fed has to be like Caesar's wife, beyond reproach. And we have seen, we recently saw a governor resign over an ethics violation, and that was put out 3-4 months after she left. In my opinion, deficient. We have seen these cost overruns, and I think it would just be much better if the Fed came forward and they got these issues out in the open rather than having a tight hold. I do think we need some transparency here because, again, that I don't know anything about construction. Seemingly, not many people at the Fed do, but the way the Fed works, there are no appropriations. They just print the extra $700 million, whether it turns into an extra billion, an extra $1.5 billion, they just print it. I can't do that. If I want a new chair in my office at Treasury, I have to go through the appropriations process.
Well, transparency, accountability, compliance were not Jay Powell's strengths. I mean, these are, we've had on the show, Scott, we've had what I would call middle-of-the-road people, Mohamed El-Arian, a very smart guy. He's called for Powell to resign several times because he has run the Fed so badly. Apart from policy, he's just run the Fed badly. And you mentioned the insider trading scandals. I think there are 4 or 5, and they all came up at the last minute. Nothing was ever really done.
And Larry, if I could interrupt you, 4 or 5 out of 19 is a tremendous number.
Right.
Tremendous number.
Right.
If you or I were the CEO of a Wall Street firm and that happened, we'd be kaput. Like, it's failure to supervise. So, but again, I'm not calling for any removals. I'm just calling for some sunshine.
Well, sunshine would be very important. So you have said, though, that the subpoena, whatever stands behind the subpoena, and there's a lot of unknowns about that, it does create something of a mess. So Powell's up in arms. You've got people, Republicans on the Senate Banking Committee, who are saying they're not going to confirm a new Fed chair until all this is, quote, cleared up, whatever that may mean. And I want to come back to the January 31st, Steve Myron, leave of absence from the CEA in that seat. That ends. I mean, it expires on the 31st.
No, Steve can continue until someone else takes that seat.
You're certain of that?
Yes.
Sure. I didn't, because some people have disputed that, actually.
No. That was a self-imposed deadline.
So that's not when this seat actually, for all intents and purposes, that's when it expires.
No. This is a very long seat. This is the Adriana Kudlow seat, which I believe has 14 years left in it. So
there's no pressure to appoint a chair in that spot.
No. The idea was that we would get the process underway to give the market great certainty, to give the market some forward guidance on forward guidance, show who the chair is going to be, get them nominated, get them moved along, and then when Chair Powell scheduled to leave in May, vacated, the market would have great clarity and certainty.
Do you think the president himself will step in and say to his Justice Department, meet with Jay Powell and settle this thing, and let's move on, because it's only got a couple months left, and we need to move on with a new chair? Will he intervene, you think?
I think we're just going to let this take its course.
Take its course, meaning there could be a grand jury?
We'll see what happens. It sounds to me like there were some unanswered inquiries. So perhaps if the D.C. District Attorney, or excuse me, the D.C. the D.C. U.S. Attorney gets some answers, and the answers are satisfactory, then we can move on.
Do you think, is it a criminal? Cost overruns, for better or worse, and it's worse. I get this. We're all against cost overruns. I'm sure it could have been done better. But it is kind of the coin of the realm in Washington, D.C. If we threw everybody in the pokey for cost overruns, Washington would be a ghost town. Maybe that's not so bad, but that's the reality of the thing. I mean, has he been singled out here?
Well, Larry, I can just tell you, incompetence is not a good look for your defense, but probably is construction incompetence. The position of Fed chair is really two positions. You're called upon to run monetary policy, and then you're also called upon to be the CEO/COO of the sprawling organization. And part of my argument has been that it hasn't been managed well for decades.
Yes.
And the bureaucracy has taken over. It's sprawling. You've got legions of economists. You've got reserve banks all over the place. A lot of kind of cross responsibilities. I'm told that at the reserve banks, 40% of the people in each building do not work for the president of the reserve bank. They report to other reserve banks. So it's, there's a word for that I won't use on your show.
It needs work.
It needs work.
It needs a lot of work.
It needs some pruning. And you could make each one of these reserve banks a center of excellence. One could be for payments. One could be for St. Louis that does great economic research. You could do that, but it does need a thorough overhaul. And again, like I said, I've been calling for an internal investigation or an internal review of all this, so perhaps this will push that idea along.
So there's no telling. One cannot assume that this subpoena given to Jay Powell and the Fed will be removed. We don't know that yet. We just don't. You're saying we don't know that. Well, it's not a yes and it's not a no.
Yeah, Larry, I can't comment because I haven't seen it. I haven't spoken to. I haven't spoken to Janine, so.
Do you think that, in view of what Mr. Trump has said about Kevin Hassett and yourself and Kevin Warsh, does this make Kevin Warsh the odds-on favorite to be the next chair?
Again, we'll see that President Trump hasn't shared his thoughts with me. What I can tell you is he's been very deliberate. He has asked exactly the questions that I think you and I and the markets would want to ask. Who can bring the board along with them? Who has the gravitas? Everything you would want done. Who can bring some order to this sprawling institution is one of the things he's looking forward to. And also, as you said in your riff just then, who is going to have an open Greenspan like mine that we could be going through a productivity boom like we did in the 90s and not just throw the brakes on things because they're alarmed by a high GDP number.
Yeah.
It's that I agree with you. I think GDP is going to surprise on the upside, but the important thing is it's going to be non-inflationary, disinflationary growth back to the 90s, and we could have kind of a 7-8% nominal GDP number.
I know. Real growth could be 5 or 6%. Okay, just one last question. Now I want to get back to the economy and tariffs on IEEPA and so forth. Are you concerned that if this whole, I'm going to call it a legal matter with Jay Powell, whatever, if it's not settled, his term as chair will end in May, but he will stay on as a member of the board, which would be, I would think you would agree, would be not optimal.
Well, look,
You have to get that done?
I think it was about 18 months ago, I came out with this idea of a shadow Fed chair that the president would have nominated someone back in August, September. I got pilloried in the media, the press. I said no mas. So I think on the backside, it would also be a good idea not to have a shadow Fed chair by someone who has stayed on, because that's happened, and it'll be Chair Powell's decision. I believe that the candidate who President Trump nominates will be confirmed quickly. I think it will be someone who is substantial, who cares about the integrity of the Fed, but cares about the dual mandate and
comes to his senses.
Markets will respect, and world leaders will respect. And when we talk about what happened with these subpoenas, you know what? I was wrong. markets didn't care. Markets went up.
I know they did.
The bond market,
Dollar went up, bond rates went down.
Bond rates went down, stock market went up, and the MOVE index, which measures bond market volatility, is at a multi-year low now, multi-year low. So markets were unfazed by it.
The strongest economy in 40 years. Let's go there. I want them to really go to Davos and just lay it out for all our little globalist friends, corporocrats and whoever else. I've been to many of those Davos things. This is a booming economy. The economics profession was wrong. The government forecasting has been wrong. It's not a small thing. His speech at Detroit was so upbeat and optimistic. I mean, this is really something. Let's move on to rosier scenarios here.
Yep, Larry, as you know better than anyone, Trump economic policy is a three-legged stool: trade, tax, and deregulation. And taxes, one big beautiful bill done July 4th, full expensing for CapEx, and we added full expensing for factories, ag structures, retroactive. So we are seeing a CapEx boom. CapEx booms are always followed by employment booms. We're seeing a productivity boom. The two, on trade, we have done these fantastic trade deals, and we are taking in, as you said earlier, substantial tariff income. We had a fiscal contraction for the calendar year 2025. So the budget deficit went down. That big GDP number that we got, 4.3% for the third quarter, the private sector GDP, you were nice enough to mention my idea, we're reprivatizing the economy. The private sector GDP was actually 4.7, but we had 0.4 of government contraction. So we are paying, we are stabilizing the debt, the deficit to GDP. In calendar year 2024 was 6.9%. Calendar year 2025, 5.4%. So we are on a trajectory to get to my 3% deficit to GDP, and we will just keep bringing debt to GDP down, and that's the important number.
Growth solves a lot of problems. You and I have talked about this for years. Growth solves a lot of problems.
For years, but what we're seeing kick in now is the third leg of the stool, and that's the slowest moving, and that's dereg. So the substantial dereg that we have pushed at Treasury, the OCC, the Fed, the FDIC. I've seen estimates from Oliver Wyman that created $2.5 trillion of extra lending capacity by the banks. So the banks have been able to lend to American businesses for this big AI boom. At Treasury, we have had a big push for small banks and community banks because they bolster Main Street. We can have the parallel prosperity. Main Street, Wall Street can both do great. Doesn't have to be one or the other. We are seeing as you mentioned, energy deregulation. So we're going to have very inexpensive energy. I think oil prices could continue to go down. And then we're able to build things in America again, Larry. We are deregulating on the environmental side, and we had really gotten out of the ability to build things. That was a great thing. We could talk about the mess in Minneapolis, but I was in suburban Minneapolis or the countryside of Minnesota, some of their great factories there. And the place called Cambria makes countertops, things like that, Winnebago, and those factories are booming. And at Winnebago, they told me that they had added a whole new line of business of batteries for their trailers and motor homes because of the 100% expensing. Wouldn't have been economic to do it, but they're doing it. That's where we're seeing this boom.
If you can get your deregulation, and I think to some extent, these banks have been overcapitalized for a variety of reasons. And here too, Jay Powell and his woke, and he went along with Biden, no loans to fossil fuels and so forth and so on, crazy stuff, DI. Anyway, you can get banks to loan to small and medium-sized businesses. That'll put another couple of points on the economy.
Well, I think that's what we're seeing now. I think it's out of the blocks. The other thing that we're going to see is the other part of the tax bill is the president's signature policies for working Americans: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, interest deductibility of American-made cars. And I'm also the IRS commissioner. Watch out, Larry. And but the bill was done on July 4th. We did not give guidance on how to change your withholding for 2025. So I can see that they're well over 100, maybe 150 billion of refunds to come to working Americans. Could be up to $1,000 per taxpayer, maybe $2,000 for a two-income family house. And then working Americans are going to change their withholding, and they will see a fill-up, a natural increase in their weekly, monthly wages. So it's really going to kick in. But again, we're also seeing inflation come down. The 3-month core goods inflation, 1.1%, Larry.
I know.
1.1%. As you said, the tariff inflation was the dog that didn't bark.
It just never barked. The economics professions, they've got a lot to account for, perhaps in another interview. Speaking of tariffs, so the Supreme Court, we're all waiting for the Supreme Court on emergency tariffs, so-called IEEPA. If they rule against you, Secretary, you're ready, you, Scott Greer, and the rest, you're ready with a backup plan?
Well, Larry, I think it's very unlikely that the Supreme Court is going to rule against a president's signature economic policy. Amy Coney Barrett, I had the privilege of sitting in the Supreme Court hearing. Amy Coney Barrett actually came out and said, if you have to do the refunds, it'll be a mess. And as President Trump has said, there's more at stake than just the tariff income. He has used IEEPA to bring in trillions of dollars of overseas investment, and that could all be at risk of being reversed. So I am very confident that the Supreme Court is going to allow the signature economic policy and not throw a wrench into things. We have paid down we are bringing in substantial revenue. We are bringing in trillions and trillions of dollars of investment. As you said, the economy is hot. And one of the reasons is this massive overseas investment.
I mean, I can't, and my other thought here, I'm not a non-lawyer that I am, but you're conducting foreign policy. The president is commander-in-chief. He's conducting foreign policy. At the same time, he's conducting trade policy. The two are inextricably linked. You cannot separate the two. And I just don't, I just sense the court doesn't want to get in the middle of that. Maybe some guardrails someplace, I don't know. But that's why I think it's going to go your way. But you could go 301 unfair trading practices, 232 national security if you had to.
If we had to, but Larry, I am confident that the Supreme Court does not want to overrule the president, does not want to unleash chaos.
Yeah. And
when we talk about it is an emergency authority, well, what has the president used it for? The fentanyl crisis. These 20%, 25% tariffs. Mexico, Canada, China, because of the precursor chemicals. And Larry, guess what's happened? Fentanyl deaths precipitously dropping, saving our American children.
That's a wonderful thing.
On October 8th, the Chinese announced rare earth export controls on any good that had a trace of Chinese rare earth materials in it, 0.01%. And it would have brought global trade to a halt. President threatened a 100% tariff on China. The Chinese, who had gone dark on us in terms of communications, immediately came to the table, and we were able to negotiate a 1-year extension because of why, Larry? IEEPA. What did the president say this week? The Iranian people are being ruthlessly murdered by that brutal regime, and the president has come out and said that he is going to put a 25% tariff on anyone who buys Iranian goods. Those are all emergency powers, as you said, that they conduct foreign policy, economic policy, and no one does it better than Donald Trump.
The Trump boom. I hope he broadcasts the Trump boom when he goes to Davos. I know you're going to urge him to do so.
Well, Larry, you could have helped me write my speech because that's what it's about.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, thank you for your time. We appreciate it very, very much.
Great to see you.
As always.